here he comes right behind us, starts shooting. And he kept on shooting. He shot one of my coworkers in the head, and then shot one of the customers in the stomach.
A heartbreaking and all too familiar scene playing out near Memphis, Tennessee tonight. A mass shooting inside a grocery store. Authorities rushing to the scene tonight. Families gather there concerned about their loved ones. Tonight, at least a dozen people are injured and at least one person is dead. Authorities say the shooter likely took their own life. Tonight, more than 26 million Americans could potentially be eligible to receive a booster shot as soon as tomorrow. More than half are 65 and older, completing their primary vaccinations at least 6 months ago. Those with underlying health conditions or jobs that put them at high risk of COVID are also eligible, including healthcare workers and teachers. But what about the millions of Americans who receive Moderna or Johnson & Johnson vaccines? And tonight, what Dr. Anthony Fauci is saying about why boosters are necessary. And new developments tonight about that situation at the southern border. Roughly 3,000 migrants remain camped under the bridge in Del Rio, Texas. The U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti resigning in protest of the deportation flights. Some Democrats calling on the Biden administration to stop the flights. This, as we are learning, more than 2/3 of those sent back by the U.S. are women and children. Tonight, the flooding concern as heavy rain and strong winds pummel parts of the country. Which communities need to be on alert? Powerful storms as we come on the air tonight. Our Rob Marciano times it all out for us. Tonight, our in-depth report on the 3 words and the one idea that have ignited a firestorm: critical race theory.
They're talking about it in the hallways. They're talking about it on the school bus. They're talking about it on the playground. And the question for educators is, are we going to allow those conversations to come into the classroom and have safe and structured conversations that provide historical context?
In some of the darkest moments tonight, the power in supporting those who have been abused and the difficult path toward healing. Our conversation with Olympic gold medalist Aly Raisman.
Having someone validate you is everything, and having that support system of, like, I have so many survivors that are my friends because it's nice to feel less alone on days where I'm struggling.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. A mobile home park, beauty spas, offices, and now a supermarket. The grim reality of life in America, especially in 2021. Few, if any, places are safe from gun violence. On this day, it was a Kroger near Memphis, Tennessee. A shooter sent employees and customers running into freezers, cowering behind shelves, hiding in the hopes of saving their lives. Witnesses at the scene say that the gunman kept on shooting and shooting and shooting. At least 12 people were shot and at least one person has died. The shooter also then apparently took his own life. Now anxious family and friends await words about their loved ones. Tonight, the investigation into just what happened. Authorities say the gunman's car is in the parking lot and officials are investigating the incident as possible workplace violence. ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas leads us off tonight.
Tonight, shoppers and employees running for their lives at this Tennessee supermarket as shots ring out.
They have 4 to 6 victims at this time.
Local police, SWAT teams, and federal agents swarming the scene. A Kroger supermarket about 30 miles east of Memphis.
There's over 200 police cars out here.
Authorities say the gunman opened fire around 1:30 this afternoon, killing at least one person and wounding at least a dozen more.
He kept on shooting. He shot one of my coworkers in the head.
As bad as this scene is, and it's horrific, I've been involved in this for 34 years, and I've never seen anything like it.
Officers canvassing the building, searching for survivors.
We found people hiding in freezers and in locked offices, and, they were doing what they had been trained to do, run, hide, fight.
One worker fleeing to the roof for safety. Police say they discovered the shooter dead of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot. The suspect's vehicle located in the store parking lot.
We are waiting on some additional equipment to get here to be able to safely check that vehicle.
Supermarkets again on the list of soft targets attacked by lone gunmen after that horrific shooting at a Colorado supermarket earlier this year, and the nation reeling from a stunning surge in mass shootings.
Stunning stats indeed. Pierre Thomas joins us now. Pierre, we know it's still very early on in this investigation, but what are police saying about a potential motive?
Well, Lindsay, they're looking into the possibility that this was a tragic case of workplace violence. So that is one of the main lines of inquiry that we're being told about by sources.
And we know that you've been tracking gun violence in this country for years now, and we've seen certainly a big increase in the number of people killed in mass shootings so far this year compared to last. So what do the numbers show?
Well, there have been more than 2,500 people shot and more than 500 victims killed in mass shootings so far this year. Truly stunning, Lindsay.
Stunning again, indeed. Pierre Thomas, our thanks to you. Now to the major news on the pandemic. The way now cleared for millions of Americans to get booster shots of the Pfizer vaccine as the CDC advisory panel has voted to recommend boosters for those 65 and older and others at high risk. So how do you know if you're eligible? And when could boosters of the Moderna and J&J vaccines become available as well? Here's ABC's Whit Johnson.
Tonight, that decision from the CDC paving the way for millions more Americans to start getting booster shots.
Yes, this motion passed.
An advisory panel voting to recommend a third Pfizer shot 6 months after a second dose to people 65 and older, long-term care residents, people 18 and older with medical conditions putting them at risk. But where the panel said no was on this question. Should there be a booster shot for people whose jobs put them at high risk of infection, like teachers, daycare staff, grocery and healthcare workers?
I think the healthcare workers are critical and cannot be forgotten.
The panel voting 9-6 against giving those frontline workers booster shots.
The nays have it, and the recommendation is not passed.
They were considering whether or not to say that everyone who was in a workplace where transmission is high or likely, such as, for example, a hospital, should get a vaccine. They didn't vote for that.
More than 13 million Americans over 65 are already at least 6 months past their second Pfizer dose.
I am over 65, and it can't help but protect me better.
Health officials not ruling out extending boosters to more people over time as more data becomes available.
And they were seeing a waning of immunity against severe disease, particularly in the elderly. And for that reason, that's why they made their decision based on their data that they were going to give a boost.
The boosters will be available to the newly eligible group as early as tomorrow at more than 30,000 locations across the country, including urgent care clinics, some federally qualified health centers, and pharmacies. At least 1,900 sites in New York City alone.
Yeah, we're ready. We know how to do this.
The CDC is saying side effects from booster shots were similar to what was reported after the second dose. 2 million immunocompromised people have already received boosters, like teacher Carla Mensch, who got her third shot earlier this month.
It was a simple piece of paper I filled out and had to just mention that I had a kidney transplant.
For people who got the Moderna and Johnson & Johnson vaccines, it will be a longer wait for boosters.
Hopefully, we're only a few weeks away from seeing clear recommendations for Moderna or clear recommendations for J&J, because right now those people are kind of left out in the cold.
Our thanks to Whit Johnson for that. And now to the border crisis in Del Rio, Texas. The number of migrants there is now shrinking as President Biden is being criticized from all sides tonight over his handling of the immigrants, including his special envoy for Haiti resigning in protest over what they call inhumane deportations. And tonight, one temporary policy change on the border. ABC's Kenneth Moten has the very latest.
Tonight, after those images of mounted Border Patrol agents aggressively confronting migrants, Homeland Security today temporarily suspending the use of horses in Del Rio, Texas.
We feel those images are horrible and horrific. I can also convey to you that the Secretary also conveyed to civil rights leaders earlier this morning that we would no longer be using horses in Del Rio.
And in a scathing letter, the U.S. Special Envoy for Haiti, Daniel Foote, quitting, citing the inhumane, counterproductive decision to deport thousands of Haitian refugees and illegal immigrants to Haiti. Fewer than 4,000 migrants remain under that Del Rio bridge, nearly two-thirds families.
I've worked along the border my entire career, over 20 years of law enforcement. I've never seen nothing like what I saw in Del Rio, Texas. It was very disturbing. And it just goes to show you that right now the border is not being secured.
Border Patrol aiming to get everyone out by the end of the week. Thousands of migrants have been loaded onto buses and planes transported to other U.S. cities or deported. Desperation at the airport in Port-au-Prince just days ago as a group of Haitians removed from the U.S. tried to rush back onto the plane.
Kenneth Moten joins us once again from Texas. And Kenneth, break down the numbers for us. How many migrants have been allowed to stay? How many have been sent home at this point?
Well, Lindsay, more than 1,400 migrants have been sent back to Haiti on a dozen flights this week. At least 3,000 still here in the U.S. being processed or preparing to be deported. But those numbers from DHS are still coming in, Lindsay.
Kenneth Moulton, our thanks to you. Now to those negotiations in Washington over President Biden's domestic spending agenda. Democrats say that they have agreed to a framework for how to pay for that non-traditional infrastructure plan for pre-K, family leave, climate change, and more. But they still haven't nailed down everything in the plan and how much it will cost. So their smaller bipartisan infrastructure plan could be at risk ahead of a vote next week. Here's ABC's Rachel Scott on Capitol Hill.
Tonight, Democratic leaders feeling the pressure, trying to show they are making progress on President Biden's domestic agenda.
The White House, the House, and the Senate have reached agreement on a framework that will pay for any final negotiated agreement.
So progress on how to pay for the bill, but no agreement on how much it will cost. And that's the real sticking point. Today, Speaker Pelosi, defensive.
This is not about price tag. It's about values, not dollars.
For moderates like Senator Joe Manchin, it is about the price tag. Progressives want $3.5 trillion for everything from childcare to fighting climate change. Manchin wants a whole lot less.
Is there any consensus yet on a price tag?
Progressives are now threatening to tank the bipartisan infrastructure bill unless they get what they want in a larger deal.
Bottom line, both bills or nothing at all.
That's what it is. Progressives say it's both bills or no bill, turning up the heat on Speaker Pelosi.
Are you confident that you have enough support within your own party to move forward with a vote on Monday?
We take it one day at a time, but I'm confident that we will pass both bills.
Speaker of the House expressing confidence once again. Rachel Scott joins us now. Rachel, President Biden spent hours with Democrats in the Oval Office yesterday trying to find a path forward for his agenda. What more can you tell us about those conversations and also what comes next?
Well, Lindsay, after the president met with over a dozen senators, including Democratic leadership, the president is still facing the same challenge that he has for months. He needs to get...
We have to interrupt Rachel Scott there. Back to that breaking news in Tennessee, a supermarket shooting near Memphis. Authorities are giving an update on the investigation. Let's listen in.
We don't want to confuse, and I definitely don't want to create any additional fear in the community. Right now, there are no known additional threats to the community. Right now, we're working a crime scene, very significant one, several, tens of thousands of square feet crime scene. I'm very thankful. Today, there was a lot of good things that came that I really believe prevented this tragedy from being much worse. And I don't want to take away from what's occurred. My thoughts and prayers, and I hope yours are too, are going to be with the victims, everybody that's impacted. A lot of people were impacted by this. So I'm thankful. As you can see, we have many partners that come to help us today, and I'm so thankful for them. Pretty much every city in this county, we've got the Memphis Police Department, Shelby County Sheriff's Office, the FBI, TBI, ATF, you name it, they came. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Something else, I was talking to our team. One of the things that I saw as I entered that building today, the training that's gone on in this community and across this country for years saved people's lives today. How many of you have heard of Run, Hide, Fight? That's exactly what those people today did. We had 44 employees that were inside at the time this started, and we've accounted for everyone. Now, we still have the same number of victims as we did at the previous one, with the addition of one. We had one walk-in to one of our local hospitals, and it wasn't a shooting victim. It was an anxiety attack. So this situation is going to drive fear, but we are a resilient community. And, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that we keep Collierville and this area as safe as we can. And right now I'm going to ask Special Agent in charge of the local FBI, Doug Korneski, if he would come and just give some brief comments. We also have Teresa Dickerson from Kroger, the public information officer, who's going to provide some information, and then we'll open it up for some quick questions. So, Doug, if you will.
Thank you, Chief Lane.
So, sir, could you say and spell your first last name?
Sure. It's Douglas Korneski, Korneski. So first, I just want to start by expressing our condolences, and again, our prayers are with the community. Many of us live in this community, shop in this store. So we deeply feel the loss and emotions here today. I want to mention that the reason we're here supporting Collierville PD. I want to give absolute kudos to the response of the police department, Shelby County Sheriffs, the fire department. Their rapid response here today was definitely commendable. Under the authorities of the Investigative Assistance for Violent Crimes Act of 2012, the FBI is allowed to provide, at the request of local law enforcement, investigative assistance. So what we're doing here today, we've deployed our evidence response team, which has a lot of experience in processing these scenes. They're here. They're inside the store. They're processing the evidence. Additionally, we have our victim specialists who have come and will be providing and have been providing assistance to the victims of the crime. And then we'll be assisting with other investigative interviews and things of that nature. So it's a great team effort. It's just always, in the sight of tragedy, it's good to see the Memphis and Collierville, West Tennessee law enforcement communities pull together, as we always do when tragedy strikes.
Thank you, everyone. Teresa Dickerson, and I'm the Corporate Affairs Manager for Kroger Delta Division. I'd like to just say every Kroger associate here in this city, in the Mid-South, we stand with our team here at the Collierville store. Actually, every associate throughout the country. We are praying for our associates here in Collierville, and we're asking the community to please pray for us as we go through this difficult time. We're saddened and heartbroken by what happened here today. It is an emotional roller coaster, as you can imagine. And we, of course, have provided counseling for every associate who's here today. And we will continue to do that. We'll also close the store. It will remain closed until further notice. Again, this is a tragic incident, and we are saddened by it. Please pray for our family, our Kroger family, the family of the victims. And we're asking today that you will, for the integrity of this investigation, please direct all questions to the Collierville Police Department. And we just want to say thank you to the police department, to the first responders who were rushing in as people were rushing out. If you can imagine that, then you'll also pray for our first responders who came out today to help us during this tragic incident. Thank you.
Ma'am, very little right now. He's deceased. We're still continuing the investigation. It's ongoing. There's search warrants that are going to be carried out shortly at different locations, or at one in particular. Can't give that out, so I know that's the next question. But we're going to carry this thing as far as we can to see and make sure that there's no one else involved.
Chief, did you talk about the truck in front of the store? I know your bomb unit has been there. As a matter of fact, I think they're right now.
Right.
Did you talk about what you're looking for?
Well, that's pretty standard in these types of situations. We want to check and make sure, we know from our past experience, or I say past experience, my past knowledge of these incidents around the country. There have been times where there have been booby traps and things like that that's been associated with these, so it's out of abundance of caution. We have the resources here. We have some of the finest specialized resources in this part of the country, and they've been here for a long time preparing for terrorist-type attacks. In this case, we don't believe that's involved here, but it's early in the investigation, and we're continuing on. But it's just making sure that any contact, that we keep this community safe.
Chief, what about this trip?
How many were customers? How many were employees?
I don't have that information right now. We'll try to get that for you tomorrow.
Do you know their status? Do you know their conditions?
Right now, it's still the same. I know that we had one in surgery and another in ICU. And so y'all continue to pray. We don't want there to be any more loss of life.
Chief, what about those gunshots? Because there's a chance that someone might have tripped, fell, any other injuries. Were they all gunshots?
I don't have any information to support that. Yes, sir, Brad.
Chief, what about the training that you all have dealt with in active shooting investigation? Without getting away specific tactics, but what helped your officers today potentially have something worse happen?
It hasn't been 3 months. The Collierville Police Department hosted a multi-agency active shooter training scenario with our law enforcement partners, fire, and I'm very thankful that we did. It's a whole lot easier to go through. You make your mistakes there. Today, what the result was victims were able to get medical treatment much faster because of the integration between police and fire. And our partners come in. Everyone knew. Very proud of our police officers. I think, and thank you for saying that, Teresa. It's one thing to see it on the news, but it's another thing when you're having to go in and know that there's a potential person armed on that other side, and there was not one person that didn't. That building was flooded with blue uniforms, and I'm very thankful for them. That's part of the investigation. We're not going to get into that now. Ma'am? It's part of the investigation. So you're talking about the shooter?
No,
I do not know. I don't have that information. We'll try to get that for you before tomorrow.
Were any officers accountable for the employees? Provide that number again.
44.
44. And how many people total were in the store at the time?
We don't have that information at this time. What we've done is we deployed multiple teams, not only searching the inside of the facility, but all the surrounding areas to make sure that we didn't have anybody that was injured that ran out. So we feel very confident that we've everybody that was involved, that we have a good handle on that now.
Chief, what are you looking for inside the store tonight, and how long will this remain a crime scene?
Well, as long as it takes to get it done right. That's the thing. We don't want to take a shortcut, so we're going to take our time. We've got very good partners that are here with us, and we're going to go through and make sure that we dot the I's and cross the T's, so I can't give you that.
We know a bomb squad was looking at a car. Can you say what was discovered or not discovered here?
Nothing's been discovered at this point.
Chief, can you just clarify the
Ma'am? I can't comment on that right now. No, as far as we know, there wasn't any other incident that led up to this at this point.
Were any officers hurt?
No officers were hurt.
Chief Lane, what's next for the emotional toll that's taken on your officers? It's not every day a police department deals with an active shooting. How's your department doing? What's next for you all after this afternoon?
Right now, our primary concern was scene stabilization and making sure that we get the victims the medical help, but there will be a time where we'll do critical stress debriefings with our officers. There'll be officers that involved in similar situations come from across the state that we'll talk about it, and what did we do right? Is there things that we can do better and those kinds of things? I don't know if you noticed, but we had chaplains here. We graduated 9 chaplains 2 weeks ago, and we had 3 chaplains on the scene here offering their services. I'm very thankful that they were here.
Did you say what type of weapon was used?
Nope.
Did you say how many?
Oh, ma'am, that's part of the investigation. So what we don't want to do is, I know you want that information, and we want to give it to you. We're not. What we have to make sure is that there's no one else involved in this, and the more information we release, the more we compromise potential investigation going forward. So we're going to get you the information eventually, but right now, please bear with me.
Do you have a time?
Kroger also has security.
I'm not sure. You want to answer that question?
Ms. Dickerson, did the Kroger have security at the time?
So we'll give you that information as soon as it's available. I'll get with him, and he can provide another update.
Chief, was there a time when you thought there was a second shooter?
We have to go into it anticipating that that's the potential for it, but there was no credible evidence that there was a second shooter. Most of our firsthand witnesses pointed to one. I know there was some reports that I think we talked about in the first briefing where there was an individual on the roof. I can personally tell you that was a Kroger employee because I was part of getting him off. So that was definitely a Kroger employee.
Chief, I know this has been asked, but I'm getting a lot of questions from a report on the other side with the checking of that vehicle. Something was removed. Is any other updates about what's happened? It's not clear yet.
Well, we're not going to release what's been removed from that vehicle, okay? If there's something, I wasn't aware of that. I'm sure there's somebody that's got eyes on it. I'm kind of staying back, and we're trying to let our professionals do their job. So, but 2 more questions.
Can you go through the timeline one more time, please?
Okay, we told you at the last briefing that the first call came out at 1:30. The first car that the dispatch has on the scene is 4 minutes later. I have since found out that as that call was going out, Collierville PD did have a car that was on the scene, so our response was almost immediate. Some people don't get on the radio. You know, it's a high-stress situation, and they've been trained, you go towards the threat, and that's what they were doing.
Any children who were injured?
Not that I've been told at this point.
Will there be another briefing tonight?
Probably not tonight. If we get any significant developments through the ongoing investigation, Major David Townsend will reach out to you guys, and we'll organize a press conference. If not, we'll have one sometime early in the morning to brief everybody up. Okay? Anything else? All right.
Thank you, Chief.
All right.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, so you've been listening to the police chief there in Tennessee. And just to give a brief recap, he says that the first call came in at 1:30. There was almost immediate police presence and response at that Kroger after they had learned that there had been a shooting. He did say that there is no credible threat to the community at this time, that a lot of good things occurred that kept this tragedy from being worse, and no other incident that they know of that led up to this. I want to bring back in our Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas, who joins us once again. And Pierre, just kind of give us the standard operating procedure here, as far as they were saying that twice the police chief said that they want to make sure no one else is involved in this. But it's their belief at this point that there was just one lone shooter, correct, and that he is now deceased.
Well, what you're seeing, Lindsay, is the abundance of caution scenario where they think they have a pretty good handle on what took place. They want to make sure that this person didn't give any information to someone, that this was going to happen, where someone should have maybe notified law enforcement. Our sources are saying that they're looking at this as a potential workplace violence incident. More on that will be coming later, we're told. But it's in the early stages of the investigation. But the key thing here, Lindsay, is that clearly law enforcement got there pretty quickly, but as you can see, the suspect had already shot in excess of 10 people, but they were able to apparently get the situation under control. Now they have to go through the process of, commandeering, looking through the suspect's vehicle. There's property associated with this person, the suspect, and getting any kind of paperwork, computers, anything that would give them a sense of the specific motive. That is the key now. But again, I think everyone is breathing a sigh of relief that even though this was a tragic, scary incident so far, thankfully only one person has died. There are a lot of people in the hospital, and I think the community, while shocked, is breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief that it wasn't much worse.
Right. It could have been certainly a lot worse. And as we talked about at the beginning of the show, we've just been seeing this spike, this surge in these mass shootings across the country. You certainly have been in the front lines of covering all of that. The officials that you're talking to, do they speculate as far as why, in particular, 2021 seems to be this banner year?
Well, I've talked to so many law enforcement officials about this, Lindsay, and they are talking about the fact that the availability of guns, combined with the fact that there just a lot of criminal activity. Some police chiefs are saying that some of the people that were released early in connection with the pandemic are now back on the street doing things the way they used to do them, i.e. back into criminal activity. They're looking very closely at repeat offenders. Some police chiefs are complaining about the fact that judges are not being as aggressive, or they're too lenient on people caught possessing firearms illegally. But I can say this in general. If you look at the numbers across the board, there's just a hell of a lot of shooting going on. And it's not just urban settings, it's settings of domestic violence involving all kinds of people of different races and socioeconomic backgrounds. The country is just in the midst of an incredibly violent moment with just a tremendous amount of firepower out there.
Pierre Thomas, our thanks to you for your reporting on this all day. And now let's go to former FBI agent and ABC News contributor Brad Garrett. And Brad, we learned from the FBI, they said that they have deployed the evidence response team. We know also that the alleged shooter's car remains on the scene in the parking lot of that Kroger. Give us a sense of what they're going to be looking for as far as the kind of evidence that they're going to be looking to obtain and how they go about it, concerned, as it was raised at that press conference, that there could be bombs or booby traps.
So you start with seeing if there's any bombs or booby traps, either with robots or other devices that you can determine are there any tripwires in the doors, etc. My guess is that wouldn't be the case with his car. It's more likely if he would have explosives, they may well be connected to wherever he might live. But the key with the car, obviously, is are there items in the car that are linked to the shooting? In other words, are there other weapons? Are there casings? Are there other types of bullets that match maybe whatever weapon he used on the scene? Are there things in there that he has written? To Pierre's point, if in fact he is a Kroger employee or has worked there, what was the real beef? Has he written anything? Has he gone online and talked about this? So some of that may be in the car, some of it may not be. Obviously, his residence and his computers and his phones may tell you more about his revenge factor, because that's the reason I say that is every one of these mass shootings are driven by revenge. They feel powerless. They feel angry. They externalize this rage and anger on the rest of us. And that's why they do them. I mean, the 4 to 5 minutes that he was shooting was a high point for him. It's like, I've taken charge. I'm going after these people that I believe have harmed me. And that's the other reason why they're so effective, Lindsay, in shooting a lot of people, in this case, in under 5 minutes.
Brad Garrett, our thanks to you and for your insight and expertise. And once again, that the police chief there expressing that it was the training that helped this from being more of an event that led to more death, because people, they ran and they hid and they fought. We're, of course, going to continue to stay on top of this breaking story as more updates come in. And now to the search for the boyfriend of Gabby Petito, and the major new headline tonight. Authorities have issued a warrant for the arrest of Brian Laundrie following the death of his girlfriend. This as we learn new details about her final days. Trevor Ault is in Florida for us again tonight.
Tonight, an arrest warrant issued for Brian Laundrie, with the decision coming as the final days of Gabby Petito's life are coming into clearer view.
You could feel his temper.
Nina Salee Angelo claims she saw Petito and Laundrie in an explosive confrontation at Mary Piglet's restaurant in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
He was just very visibly angry. She was crying, and he immediately went to the hostess stand and was just, he was just going in on the hostess and the waitress, and then eventually the manager.
That was August 27th, 3 days after investigators had originally said Gabby was last seen. And the same day, her mom received a final text from Gabby's phone reading, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." But Stan is Gabby's grandfather, and Gabby's mother says she never called him that. And the city of Moab, Utah, now launching a formal investigation of the police response to a fight between the couple days prior. Today in Florida, Laundrie's parents retrieving the Ford Mustang the FBI towed from their home Monday, the car they told officials Brian drove to a nearby nature reserve last week before he vanished. Tonight, droves and dive teams again searching for him in that unforgiving, alligator-infested terrain.
Trevor Ault joins us once again. Trevor, late today, the FBI issued that arrest warrant. Can you tell us what Brian is and is not charged with?
Sure. So, Lindsay, it is important to be clear that Brian Laundrie is not charged with Gabby Petito's homicide, at least not right now. What he is charged with is illegally using a debit card and PIN number that didn't belong to him to withdraw money, at least $1,000, after Gabby died. Now, in regards to her disappearance and her death, Right now, he is still simply a person of interest. But what this arrest warrant means at the very least is if they find Brian Laundrie, they can then arrest him on site. They are now wrapping up their search here in Florida for the evening, but they have said they will be back out here again tomorrow. Lindsay?
I appreciate your explanation for the context behind those charges. Trevor, thanks so much. Now to schools and a flashpoint issue, how to teach and discuss race in America's classrooms. Tonight, we look at our children's history lessons and the curricula at the center of controversy. Here's ABC's Janae Norman.
Laughing. That's funny.
Tonight's Rochester School Board meeting turned into a confrontation about teaching race theory.
Dozens of parents believe DEI programming is critical race theory.
Critical race theory, 3 words, 1 idea, igniting a firestorm. With kids going back to school amid a painful racial reckoning, efforts to push for a more critical look at our nation called unpatriotic by opponents.
They want to teach that America is bad, and they want to indoctrinate our kids.
But despite passionate pleas from parents for and against CRT, the historians and educators we spoke to agree that CRT, a higher education coursework, isn't being taught in classrooms. Instead, the term has become shorthand for the debate around diversity and equity initiatives in schools.
What is CRT?
It began in law schools in the late 1970s. And it was started mostly by African-American law professors. They reanalyzed law in other institutions and tried to argue that racism and racist history was baked into those institutions.
I mean, that's not what kids are learning in elementary or middle school.
No, as far as I know, there's no 4th grade teacher that's ever gotten up one morning and said, like, good morning, children. You know, today we're going to study critical race theory. But in some districts, perspectives borrowed from CRT have been shared and discussed.
States like Nevada, California, and Nebraska moving to include what they call culturally responsive materials in their curriculum. And Washington State recently requiring ethnic studies materials, which reflect the perspectives of people of color, to be available in K-12 schools. It's in Seattle. We meet with self-proclaimed anti-racist high school educator Jesse Hagopian as he prepares to teach a citywide Black Studies course he helped launch last year. Jesse says anti-racist teaching shouldn't be controversial.
Students need to be able to understand the many different causes of structural racism and to be able to question, to talk back to their textbooks.
If kids are starting to have these conversations in school, they are learning how to have civilized conversations in which they are disagreeing, but working through those.
They're talking about it in the hallways. They're talking about it on the school bus. And the question for educators is, are we going to allow those conversations to come into the classroom and have safe and structured conversations that provide historical context?
But in Loudoun County, Virginia, AP government teacher Monica Gill says this approach is creating a divide amongst students.
They're being encouraged to discriminate against each other. They're being encouraged to look at each other as oppressed or oppressor based on skin color. And this is no way to do education.
She's not alone. Those concerns reaching the halls of state legislatures. 8 states enacted laws this year to regulate classroom instruction centered around race, and similar bills have been proposed in several other states.
Some want to teach New Hampshire children that America is a hateful place with a hateful history.
In New Hampshire, ads like these opposing critical race theory.
Paid for by 1776 Action.
1776 Action, an activist group inspired by former President Trump's 1776 Commission, created in part in response to the New York Times 1619 Project.
Nobody has an issue, anyone that I know of, in this movement of, not teaching bad parts of history, not teaching about race and racism. It's this divisiveness of pitting kids against one another based upon things like skin color and gender.
Some opponents also citing concerns about what they consider a rewriting of history, like the Texas Revolution.
And you will always remember the Alamo.
The story of the Alamo, celebrated in the iconic 1960 film. But a new book called Forget the Alamo collects years of historic scholarship that it was a battle not just for freedom, but for the preservation of slavery.
And so the defenders of the Alamo have become, these martyrs for a cause, are really looking at it from actual historical fact. Not heroes.
Professor Christopher Carmona teaches high school students in a predominantly Hispanic border town in Texas. He says the Alamo legends are a reason he fought to get Mexican-American studies into classrooms.
When someone sees themselves not reflected or only reflecting in negative capacity, they start to internalize that.
School curriculums are now at the center of an age-old debate recently reignited. How should students learn American history?
The history classroom has to be in conversation with what's going on in society for it to be relevant.
Sam Weinberg is the head of Stanford University's History Education Group and founded the Reading Like a Historian Project, the largest provider of free social studies resources.
Our history curriculum is a curriculum where students learn the past, not because they're spectators to it, but because they have an opportunity to engage in its remaking.
And how do you do that?
Students have to put the evidence together for themselves and come up with an interpretation that makes sense to them rather than repeating somebody else's story.
The experts and teachers we spoke with agreed that history teachers have a unique responsibility to help the next generation learn from the past to forge a better future.
What would people say about the German school system saying because teaching about the Holocaust makes young people feel uncomfortable, German schools are no longer going to teach the Holocaust?
Kids at a very young age are aware of race, and they want to talk about race. It's the adults that feel uncomfortable and don't know how to talk about it.
This is an emotional subject, but at the same time, I don't think you can or should use that fact to prevent the dialogue that we need.
Janae Norman, ABC News, Seattle.
Very provocative conversation there. Our thanks to Janae for it. And still ahead here on Prime, she survived horrific sexual abuse. She was ignored by the people who were supposed to help her. And now she is working to stop what happened to her from happening to others. Our conversation with Aly Raisman. Harry and Meghan take New York, and some in the British press seem a bit upset about that. But first, our tweet of the day. The Mets announcer tweeting this adorable photo of Javier Baez watching the fireworks on the field with his son.
ABC News is America's #1 news. #1 in the morning, #1 in the evening, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights, the #1 daytime talk show, and #1 in streaming news. ABC News, America's #1 news.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Now, with so much on the line, more Americans are turning to David Muir and ABC's World News Tonight than any other program across all of television. Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
It was an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
Shoppers and employees running for their lives at this Tennessee supermarket as shots ring out.
So they have 4 to 6 victims at this time.
Local police, SWAT teams, and federal agents swarming the scene. A Kroger supermarket about 30 miles east of Memphis.
There's over 200 police cars out here.
Authorities say the gunman opened fire around 1:30 this afternoon, killing at least one person and wounding at least a dozen more.
He kept on shooting. He shot one of my coworkers in the head.
As bad as this scene is, and it's horrific, I've been involved in this for 34 years, and I've never seen anything like it.
Officers canvassing the building, searching for survivors.
We found people hiding in freezers and in locked offices, and, they were doing what they had been trained to do, run, hide, fight.
Florida now moving forward with its own abortion law after Texas banned most abortions last month. A Florida Republican lawmaker filed a bill that would ban most abortions after 6 to 8 weeks and would allow people to sue doctors for terminating pregnancies. The Florida bill does make exceptions for rape, incest, and medical emergencies that threaten the life of the woman.
Andrew Wiggins, the Golden State Warriors forward and the team's second leading scorer last season, is still refusing to get the COVID-19 vaccine. His decision could mean he'll be forced to sit out home games in San Francisco. Wiggins is believed to have asked for a religious exemption, which the NBA is expected to grant. The city of San Francisco, though, can override the exemption. Meanwhile, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee said today that athletes have until November 1st to be fully vaccinated if they want to compete in the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics.
This mom is a hero, and her mama bear instincts kicked right in. She was enjoying a day at the park this morning with her 14-month-old son when, for just a few seconds later, he disappeared. Now, officials say he fell down an open manhole. We're talking 7 feet down into 2 feet of sewage water.
This happened in New Jersey. The mother called 911, and while on the phone, her son was swept away by that water.
She put down the phone, jumped into the manhole, and was able to reach him before he got to a part of the sewer that was too small for her to get into. And she managed to pull them both out of the sewer right before we arrived.
Authorities said the mother and child were wet and, of course, terrified, but not hurt. The child had to be taken to the hospital as a precaution. Authorities think that he could have swallowed some sewer water. The township is now checking all of its manholes to make sure there are no other manholes that are open.
Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, toured the World Trade Center Observatory Thursday. They were joined by the governor, the mayor, and his wife and son. The two were all smiles, Meghan saying briefly it was good to be back in New York City, possibly her first time since her baby shower 2 years ago.
It was so exciting, and he's taller and thinner than I thought he was.
Meanwhile, the British media trailing Meghan and Harry on their first major trip since stepping down as senior royals. The pair's schedule has not been sent out in advance by their team, leaving reporters scrambling to make sense of their trip.
Next up, our conversation with Olympic gymnast, advocate, and documentary filmmaker Aly Raisman. She is a world champion and two-time Olympian, winner of 3 golds, 2 silvers, and a bronze, and also a sex abuse survivor who last week bravely testified before Congress about a whole system that failed her and so many others.
Nassar found more than 100 new victims to molest. It was like serving innocent children up to a pedophile on a silver platter.
In a Michigan courtroom back in January 2018, she confronted her abuser, Team USA Dr. Larry Nassar, inspiring countless others.
Larry, you do realize now that we, this group of women you so heartlessly abused over such a long period of time, are now a force and you are nothing.
Now she is continuing to use her voice to lift others up as the interviewer and executive producer of a new documentary special called Aly Raisman, Darkness to Light, premiering tomorrow night on Lifetime. ABC's Ariel Reshef sat down with Aly Raisman earlier today.
Aly Raisman, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and for your bravery and the hope you've given to so many survivors. I want to just talk about your strength in the gym, in the courtroom, and most recently testifying before Congress. What do you want other survivors to know about what it takes for you to have the courage to tell your story?
Thank you for having me. I want other survivors to know that even if they feel alone and they feel like there isn't a light at the end of the tunnel, I want them to know that I've felt that way too. I think, unfortunately, it's very common for survivors to feel that way, but I hope that they know that there is hope. Don't give up, because there are really good people out there. And I can share from experience, I've had people who have, gaslit me or covered up my abuse, but I also have had people who have supported me and validated me. And it is everything for a survivor when you feel validated and feel heard.
In your documentary, you meet with survivors from all walks of life. Why was it so important to you to showcase that diversity and representation?
I wanted to send the message that even, it's not just Olympic athletes or women in Hollywood, that stories that are important. And we're not the only survivors of sexual abuse or sexual assault out there. And I recognize that there are so many people out there that are suffering in silence or struggling or speaking up and not getting the support they need.
And it's such an important message that there are many different faces to survivors, and you certainly do a really powerful job of showcasing that. We got a sneak peek of your show.
Winning gold medals doesn't take away the pain of what happened.
It struck us how attentively and compassionately you are listening to these other survivors, and you often say to them, I believe you and I support you. Why is it so important for a survivor to hear that, and do you wish that you had heard that earlier on?
The way a survivor heals is linked to how their abuse is handled, and so one person can have so much power on another survivor's healing. And to say to a survivor, I support you, I believe you, I'm validating what you're feeling, and everything you're feeling, you're allowed to feel that way. And what happened to you is real, is everything. Although, my abuse case was not handled properly by the authorities and people in positions of power, my mom and my family and the people around me really supported me and continue to support me. And so for that, I am so grateful. I think survivors, we often diminish what we're feeling because we think sometimes that somebody has it worse, or I shouldn't say anything, or I'm scared I'm not going to be believed. And so having someone validate you is everything. And having that support system of, I have so many survivors that are my friends because it's nice to feel less alone on days where I'm struggling. I'll call them and we have this common empathy, and we talk about things because sometimes it's nice to just talk to someone who knows what you're going through.
Absolutely. And your testimony was gut-wrenching, but so important for everyone to hear. It seems throughout your journey that you have had to set up some boundaries.
I also just want to say, just to be honest, I get super triggered when we go into graphic detail. So if you don't mind.
I'm with you. Absolutely.
Aly, is it hard for you to set boundaries as you continue to advocate for other survivors?
Yeah, it's definitely something that's really difficult because I recognize that a lot of survivors that I meet, some of them tell me you're the only person I've ever told, or I told someone 50 years ago and they didn't believe me, and you're the first person that I've told since then. And so that's a very heavy weight for me to carry. I want to make sure that I support them and I validate them and I give them what they need. But I also recognize that if they say something that really triggers me, I can't be the best version of myself to support them in that moment. But I've realized that when I say to a survivor, when you go into graphic detail, it really triggers me. I've never had a survivor not understand that.
That in and of itself is an important concept to convey to other survivors, that it's okay to say that you're triggered by something and to not need to hear all the details of it. So that was quite compelling to hear from you. In your documentary, you talked about going from these 7-hour workouts in the gym to some days feeling like you could barely put one foot in front of the other. Do you some days still feel sapped of all of your energy?
Yes, I definitely do. I think I'm getting to the point now where I'm able to recognize things that trigger me, or recognize when I've done too much. When October comes around, or maybe even Saturday morning after the show airs, I might have a moment where I need to just lay in bed, watch Netflix, snuggle with my puppy, and just, it might be hard. And so in those moments, I think I'm more aware of that now, and I'm okay with that, where I think before as an athlete, I tried to fight it and say, I need to push through, but I'm realizing this weekend, I'm not going to push through. And if I want to relax, I'm going to relax and give myself that space, because that's going to help me not have those moments where I feel like I can't even walk up the stairs.
What was it like to testify before Congress, knowing you had the support really of the entire nation and, of course, your teammates sitting right beside you?
We're so fortunate to have the support that we have. I recognize how rare it is to have, Democrats and Republicans in agreement and supporting us. We're fighting for something that seems so obvious, for children to not have to suffer abuse. And so it means a lot that people are supporting us. But I think sometimes as a survivor, when you feel gaslit, it's hard to not worry, should I say the wrong thing? Are they right? Because there's so much already distrust and so much stuff and guilt and shame and everything. And it can be so complicated. So I feel very hopeful for the first time in a while. And I am just blown away by all the support. And it's really helped me so much.
I've heard you say on numerous occasions, all we need is one adult to stand between a child and their abuser. In your situation, what might that have looked like?
I think that it's so disappointing that we're learning more facts as the years go on, and we still don't have all the answers. A full independent investigation of the FBI, USAG, and United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. But I think it starts with, the leadership at USA Gymnastics had known about this. I had reported over 6 years ago, and we are still finding out answers, of certain people knowing about it and not doing anything about it. And I think that every organization in the world should be asking themselves this question of, if something bad happens to a child, who can be that one adult? And can we have every person have the integrity to be that one adult, so we don't have to have so many children suffer that don't need to.
Aly, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and for the continued advocacy on behalf of other survivors. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
And our thanks to both Ariel as well as Aly. Before we go tonight, our image of the day, best caption for this picture wins. We're all feeling for German Chancellor Angela Merkel. This is the face of the world leader getting bitten while feeding a bird. Ouch. That is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Up in the next hour, we're staying on top of a few things, including that supermarket shooting in Tennessee. And James Longman is standing by in Spain with an update on that slow-motion volcanic disaster that's now playing out.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive? Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcasts.
This was a love triangle. Wealthy older man, younger, attractive gold digger, and her younger lover who happened to be a former football player in the NFL.
The radio call came out, shots fired.
Nanette is in prison for the rest of her life. Same with Eric Naposki.
Now, the exclusive jailhouse interview.
You think you'll ever go free?
Yes.
How would that make you feel if you knew that Eric and Nanette had gone free?
Horrified.
Friday night, the stunning 2020 true crime event on ABC.
Most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Now streaming on ABC News Live. 2020 true crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
She revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. Our weather team is tracking a strong line of storms on the move through parts of the Northeast. Flash flood watches are up for millions in already saturated areas. Our team is also tracking Tropical Storm Sam in the Atlantic. It could become a major hurricane by early next week. The White House has started telling government agencies to prepare for a potential government shutdown if a stopgap bill is not signed into law by September 30th. This as Democrats continue to try and come to an agreement on a sweeping multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure bill. A framework on how to pay for that has allegedly already been agreed upon. And in Washington state, the search continues for Riatha Finkbonner. She was traveling with family and friends to Vegas to get married when she disappeared earlier this month. Her family says an unidentified woman at a motel was the last person to see her. According to our station in Seattle, she is one of 57 indigenous people from Washington state alone reported missing this year. Back now to that breaking news, a supermarket shooting at a Kroger near Memphis, Tennessee. Witnesses at the scene say that the gunman just kept on shooting and shooting and shooting, sending employees and customers running for their lives. At least 12 people were shot. At least one person has died. The shooter also then apparently took his own life. Here's ABC's Chief Justice correspondent Pierre Thomas.
Tonight, shoppers and employees running for their lives at this Tennessee supermarket as shots ring out.
They have 4 to 6 victims at this time.
Local police, SWAT teams, and federal agents swarming the scene. A Kroger supermarket about 30 miles east of Memphis.
There's over 200 police cars out here.
Authorities say the gunman opened fire around 1:30 this afternoon, killing at least one person and wounding at least a dozen more.
He kept on shooting. He shot one of my coworkers in the head.
As bad as this scene is, and it's horrific, I've been involved in this for 34 years, and I've never seen anything like it.
Officers canvassing the building, searching for survivors.
We found people hiding in freezers and in locked offices, and, they were doing what they had been trained to do, run, hide, fight.
One worker fleeing to the roof for safety. Police say they discovered the shooter dead of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot. The suspect's vehicle located in the store parking lot.
We are waiting on some additional equipment to get here to be able to safely check that vehicle.
Supermarkets again on the list of soft targets attacked by lone gunmen after that horrific shooting at a Colorado supermarket earlier this year, and a nation reeling from a stunning surge in mass shootings.
Our thanks to Pierre Thomas for that. And we are now joined by an eyewitness, Tawana French, who was outside of the Kroger supermarket during the shooting. Tawana, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, we're so glad that you are safe. Give us a sense of what was happening. Were you heading into the Kroger? Had you already been in there? And what did you see? What did you hear?
Actually, I was heading into the Kroger. I was at the door to enter the store, and I got rushed. A family, seemed like a family, a lady and about 4 children, and she's pushing them out of the door, dragging one behind her, falling on the ground, and telling them to just run, run, run. Man coming out of the store at the same time as her, jumping over her. And a split second later, I hear gunfire.
And so what do you do in that moment?
From the door. Oh, in that moment, I did just what the lady said. I ran. Before I could get to my car, which was not very far at all, I heard even more gunfire. Rapid succession, just pow, 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 pow. I just wanted to get to a safe place. I didn't know if the gunman was in the store or outside of the store.
Bless you.
And I just wanted to be in a safe place.
And what was going through your mind? I know that obviously you were looking for safety. How fearful were you? Did you have any idea? Were people suggesting that, there's a shooter inside Kroger? What was the scene like?
Well, this happened very, very quickly. Probably a total of less than 2 minutes, maybe no more than a minute. From the time that I was at the door and the lady and her family ran out to the time I got to my car, because I was only about 6 cars away from the front of the store, from the entry. Before I got to my car, I could now see people running out of the other entry. I heard one lady yell, I think he's been hit. I think someone's been hit. But I started seeing people running and getting in cars and speeding out of the parking lot as quickly as they could. As I was leaving, I started seeing police cars come in.
And so it was just a matter of minutes between the time that you heard those first shots fired to the police arrival on the scene.
That's correct.
And you left as well, so you didn't sit around in your car in the parking lot. You got in your car and immediately left.
That is correct.
And we've also heard reports that there was an employee on the roof. That was confirmed as well by the police chief. Did you see that person on the roof?
I did not see that person on the roof. At that point, I was headed away from Kroger. When I heard the shots, I was at the entry into the store. So I was actually in the first, that store has 2 entrances. You come into the first door and then you enter the store into the second door. I was at the second door to enter into the store. And that's when the people started running out. So I didn't see anything on the outside, and I headed towards my car and kept going once I got to my car. My car, fortunately, was not headed in the direction of the store, so everything at that point was behind me.
Well, Ms. Tawana French, again, we're so glad that you're safe. Appreciate your account and your time spending it with us to just give us a sense of what that moment of, we imagine, just sheer fear must have been like. Really appreciate you tonight.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
And now to the crisis at the border. The U.S. Border Patrol just announced it has temporarily stopped using agents on horseback after disturbing images caused an uproar this week. The State Department's envoy to Haiti has also resigned in protest, saying in his resignation letter, the Biden administration policy approach is deeply flawed. This as the administration bolsters its effort to deport the thousands of Haitian migrants flooding the border. ABC's Faith Abube has the very latest.
2 months after taking on the role of special envoy to Haiti, U.S. Ambassador Daniel Foote walking off the job, calling the Biden administration's policy inhumane and counterproductive as it sends thousands of Haitian migrants back to a country embroiled in political turmoil and reeling from natural disasters.
His views were put forward, they were valued, they were heard, different policy decisions were made in some circumstances.
Foote now the latest among a growing chorus of critics, including Democrats, lashing out at the Biden administration's handling of the Haitian migrant surge.
All they're trying to do is escape from violence in their country. We're saying to the president and everybody else, you got to stop this madness.
The State Department saying it's working with international partners to address the challenges the returnees face in Haiti. Since Sunday, the Department of Homeland Security says the U.S. has flown more than 1,400 migrants back to Haiti. 3,200 are in custody here in the U.S. being processed. But right now, thousands, including families with young children, remain under the international bridge in Del Rio, Texas, seeking asylum.
There is a humanitarian need here, and we need to make sure that we're treating everybody fairly.
Some using cardboards for bed and building a tent city with sticks, plastic bags, and pieces of cloth. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, desperate to stop the flow of migrants, ordering state troopers to line up their vehicles, forming a steel wall to block more migrants from flowing into the state.
Our thanks to Faith Abube. And now to the negotiations in Washington, D.C. over President Biden's domestic spending agenda. Democrats say they've agreed to a framework for how to pay for that non-traditional infrastructure plan for pre-K, family leave, climate change, and more. But they still haven't nailed down everything in the plan and how much it'll cost. So their smaller bipartisan infrastructure plan could be at risk ahead of a vote next week. Here's ABC's Rachel Scott on Capitol Hill.
Tonight, Democratic leaders feeling the pressure, trying to show they are making progress on President Biden's domestic agenda.
The White House, the House, and the Senate have reached agreement on a framework that will pay for any final negotiated agreement.
So progress on how to pay for the bill, but no agreement on how much it will cost. And that's the real sticking point. Today, Speaker Pelosi, defensive.
This is not about price tag. It's about values, not dollars.
For moderates like Senator Joe Manchin, it is about the price tag. Progressives want $3.5 trillion for everything from childcare to fighting climate change. Manchin wants a whole lot less.
Is there any consensus yet on a price tag?
Progressives are now threatening to tank the bipartisan infrastructure bill unless they get what they want in a larger deal.
Bottom line, both bills or nothing at all. That's what it is.
Progressives say it's both bills or no bill, turning up the heat on Speaker Pelosi.
Are you confident that you have enough support within your own party to move forward with a vote on Monday?
We take it one day at a time, but I'm confident that we will pass both bills.
Speaker of the House expressing confidence once again. Rachel Scott joins us now. Rachel, President Biden spent hours with Democrats in the Oval Office yesterday trying to find a path forward for his agenda. What more can you tell us about those conversations and also what comes next?
Well, Lindsay, after the president met with over a dozen senators, including Democratic leadership, the president is still facing the same challenge that he has for months. He needs to get the entire Democratic Party, both wings, moderates and progressives, on the same page. And right now, he just does not have the votes. So bottom line here is that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has committed to try to bring this for a vote to the floor on Monday. We do not know whether or not she has the votes to move that forward. But this is going to be a very critical next couple of days here on Capitol Hill. In just 7 days, in just 1 week, we are set to hit a government shutdown. Right now, agencies are preparing for that. And so what will happen here over the next couple of days will be absolutely critical, Lindsay.
Many of the Democrats that we've been talking to remain optimistic, however, so we shall see. Rachel Scott, thanks as always. Now to that dramatic criminal trial of disgraced superstar R. Kelly. We heard closing arguments today as the jury prepares to take this case of alleged sex abuse and racketeering. We couldn't bring cameras into court, but we are joined now by attorney Bernardo Villalona with Joey Jackson Law, who's been carefully tracking this trial. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, Bernardo.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the prosecution. They summed up their case by arguing that R. Kelly wasn't just sexually and physically abusive to girls, boys, and adult women, but that he used a network of people to essentially entrap his victims and silence them. How well do you feel that they made this argument?
So first off, the prosecution, their closing arguments lasted about 6 hours. So they started yesterday and finished up today. However, in those 6 hours, they were very detailed in how this enterprise, the inner circle of R. Kelly, assisted him, enabled him to be able to carry out these sexual acts with these young ladies for so many years. I think the prosecution did a great job in going victim by victim and showing how their testimony is corroborated and why the jury can believe what they're saying and how is it that this enterprise enabled that to go on for so long.
And the defense has been arguing that R. Kelly was the innocent one, painting his accusers as the greedy fame seekers here. Did they present compelling evidence to that effect?
So the defense attorney today summed for about 2 hours and 40 minutes. And their entire closing argument, they were saying, of course, R. Kelly is the victim. He is the king of R&B, and that these women were out there for money. These were groupies. They wanted his money. And when you hear of surviving R. Kelly, they were actually surviving off of R. Kelly. And that was the theme throughout his closing argument, that all these women and some of their family members were after him because they wanted his money. They wanted to live his life, that they are now saying that these things happen against their consent because now they don't have that money. They're looking to sue. They're looking for book deals. And that's why they have to say what they're saying now.
As an experienced trial lawyer yourself, how do you see this case playing out to the jury? Who wins the day here?
Look, I'm going to tell you, so both sides have done an excellent job in terms of their closing arguments. It's going to come down to those 12 jurors to determine whether those victims, Jane Doe's 1 through 6, or actually hearing from 2 to 6, plus the uncharged victims, whether they believe what they're saying. Because in terms of physical evidence, there is little to none. However, what the prosecution is relying on is on testimony. However, for the defense, I have to say, you know, there are strength and numbers, and that is what the prosecution has on their side, is that one, they put on 45 witnesses. They were able to put on many witnesses to corroborate the long history of how R. Kelly was treating these women, how he indoctrinated these women, how he gaslit these women, how he isolated them and made them dependent on him. And that's why they weren't able to leave on their own. But for years, sexual exploitation, talking about kidnapping, bribery. There are a lot of charges against R. Kelly, and it's going to be a long deliberation for that jury to get through all those charges. But in the end, you need those 12 jurors to find that the prosecution proved that case beyond a reasonable doubt if they want a conviction in this case.
Okay, so at least you're thinking at this point it's going to be a long deliberation. So we shall see. We'll be tuning in and keeping up to date with this case. Bernardo Villalona, we thank you so much for your expertise and your time tonight.
Thank you.
Now to Spain's Canary Island, where the volcanic eruption has slowed down and evacuations have now stopped. ABC's James Longman has the latest on that.
Yeah, hi, Lindsay. Another night of red-hot lava pouring in to the night sky. Another night of smoke and ash. It has been pretty extraordinary, actually, to be stood here listening to the explosions. It sounds like bombs going off in the background. We have had some good news because one of the 2 lava flows that have been of main concern has kind of been brought under control, and as much as you can bring 1,800-degree molten rock under control. But the other one is still making its way to where people live. 500 buildings have already been destroyed here, and emergency services are doing what they can to stop more being destroyed, and they're basically diverting it by digging up the rock and the earth in order to create walls of earth and trenches to kind of snake the lava away. But that's proving very, very difficult. This is a volcanic island. It's volcanic earth, so it's very difficult to do that. But that is what firefighters are trying to do. Another big risk here is all this ash that's coming down. It's landing on rooftops, and that causes the possibility of collapse. So that's another thing people have to think about. But for the moment, evacuations have stopped as they hope the lava is starting to slow down. But you never know, because new fissures can open up. But today was a busy day here on La Palma. The King of Spain was visiting, the Prime Minister as well was here, and everyone really hoping and praying that this lava stops before any more destruction is caused. Lindsay?
James, thank you so much. Next to the warning for car owners from police departments across the country. Thieves may be trying to steal a critical part of the cars that cost thousands to replace. ABC's transportation correspondent Gio Benitez has more on what you can do to protect yourself.
This morning, scenes like this playing out in American neighborhoods. Watch as this man in a Sacramento area driveway tries to steal a truck's catalytic converter. He fails, but comes back the next night only to find a note from the homeowners. Not far away, in broad daylight, these two jump out of a van, targeting a catalytic converter on a Toyota Prius. A neighbor recording chased away with a blowtorch.
Get out of here, go.
In Houston, police sounding the alarm.
The theft of these parts off of vehicles is up over 300% compared to last year.
In August, Houston police finding more than 300 catalytic converters in this truck and arresting 2 men. In suburban Maryland, this mechanic tells us thieves target Toyota Priuses because their parts are worth more.
Basically, what they did is they cut here with some kind of pipe cutter of some kind, because it's a pretty clean cut, and they unbolted there where it goes up to the engine, and they take out the converter. They get in and out very quickly, 5, 10, 15 minutes, I would think, tops.
In Mesa, Arizona, alleged thieves parking right next to this SUV, using their van to shield them from public view. The owner not knowing what happened until she drove away.
It's just loud. It's like my muffler fell off.
But why are they stealing this specific piece? Well, on average, police say thieves can make up to $300 per converter. The precious metals in the catalytic converters soaring in value, now worth more than gold. State Farm telling ABC News it's paid out $43 million in claims for catalytic converter theft in just the last year. The worst states, California, Texas, and Minnesota. But insurance doesn't always cover the theft. You must have full coverage. One way to protect your car, adding a steel plate cover over your catalytic converter.
The amount of time that it would take to steal the converter would deter them from taking it. You can't just jack the car up and cut it off and be gone in less than a minute or two.
Our thanks to Gio. Next tonight, a closer look at unintentional bias in America. In recent years, almost every organization, big and small, seems to have pledged anti-discrimination training to raise awareness and change personal behaviors. But does that work? And is it even possible for people to change? It's a big topic science journalist Jessica Nordell tackles in her new book, The End of Bias, a beginning detailing a transformative, groundbreaking exploration into how we can eradicate unintentional prejudice behavior. Jessica, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
I want to start off with you just defining what implicit and unconscious bias is and how that differs from stereotyping based on your research.
So when we grow up in a culture, we learn categories that people belong to, and we absorb passively and actively stereotypes and associations about those categories. What unconscious bias describes is this phenomenon, which is that when we encounter a person who we recognize as belonging to one of those categories, those stereotypes and associations begin to influence the way that we interact with people. So they affect our thoughts, our voice, our emotions, our actions. And the two really important things about unconscious or unintentional bias are that, for one, it can happen really fast. So we can behave in these ways that are influenced by stereotypes without even necessarily knowing that we're doing it. And really importantly, these are reactions that really conflict with values. So someone can believe themselves to be egalitarian or really feel strongly that fairness is an important value and still be susceptible to behaving in these ways that conflict with those values.
In your book, you also talk about problems with diversity training in America. What works and what doesn't?
So there are a couple of problems there are many problems with diversity training. I'll highlight two. One is that these trainings are rarely evaluated. So they could be having a positive effect, they could be having a negative effect, they could be having no effect. We just often don't have a lot of data about what kind of impact they're having on people's actual behaviors and on the kinds of structures that people are willing to support in their organizations. Another big problem is that they can create the appearance of change without actual change. So what really needs to happen is leaders and organizations need to ask not if, but how patterns of bias show up in their organizations, and then take really systematic steps to eliminate those patterns of bias. There are a lot of different approaches that can work, including transparency for promotion and hiring, creating really objective criteria so that when people are evaluated, they're evaluated according to the same criteria instead of kind of amorphous or ambiguous criteria. But the important thing is that this starts from the top and that leaders really have a commitment to making serious changes in their organization and not having like a one-time diversity training as a means to the end.
Another interesting point that you touch on is anti-bias interventions and how difficult it can be for people to recognize their own predispositions. Are we still much better at documenting bias than solving it?
We're pretty good at documenting it, and it is challenging to solve it. I mean, one real problem is that we all think we're more objective than we are. We all think that we're maybe just a little bit less biased than everybody else, and it can be painful to do the kind of introspective awareness that we need to do in order to examine how these patterns show up in our own minds and in our own behaviors. But these are really old. They're hundreds, in some cases, thousands of years old, these negative patterns, stereotypes, and frankly, toxic lies. So we're not immune from them. And it's really important that we do that kind of introspection because the structures that we create in society come from individuals. I mean, they're not supernaturally, descended from the heavens. They come from individuals' minds, hearts, motivations. And so that kind of internal introspection is really essential.
And what role do you think that the hyperpolarization of the 2020 presidential election cycle, what did that play as far as making it more difficult for Americans to recognize their own biases?
The polarization really does make it difficult because there's this phenomenon in psychology called outgroup homogeneity. And it's sort of a technical term, but basically what it means is that we tend to see our own group as variable and various. And we tend to see the group that we don't belong to as homogenous and monolithic. And when we think of the other as a homogenous monolith, it makes it easier to dehumanize the other group and makes it harder to see them as fully human, which is really where we need to start. I mean, we need to see another group as complex as ourselves. That's really the beginning of true humanization, which we need in order to actually be able to talk in a meaningful way and communicate across differences.
And lastly, in your opinion, are there ways that we could change our political process that might make it easier for people to find common ground with each other?
Well, I can't speak to the political process necessarily, but I do think that having meaningful connections with people who belong to different groups, that has been shown. There's a lot of research that shows that having meaningful relationships with people who have social differences can dramatically decrease stereotyping. So I don't know exactly from a political perspective, but from a community level perspective, a neighborhood, individual level perspective, creating connections across difference is a really important place to start.
Jessica Nordell, we thank you again for your time tonight. The End of Bias, a Beginning, is available now wherever books are sold. And still ahead, the push by European regulators that could have major implications for your iPhone. You're going to want to hear about this.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was supposed to report to prison to begin a 17-year sentence.
They let him turn himself into jail with no escort.
No one thought he would run.
How do you evade capture for 25 years? How do you do that?
Now, join the search, following the U.S. Marshals as they uncover new leads in a global manhunt. Can you help catch this fugitive?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man?
Have you seen this man? Listen and join the all-new hunt wherever you get your podcast.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline. Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you? Yeah.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us. Welcome back, everyone. We're tracking several international headlines at this hour. Haitian migrants in a makeshift camp on the Mexican side of the Rio Grande woke up today surrounded by security forces as a helicopter thundered overhead. Mexican National Guard troops blocked a park entrance and immigration agents waited with 3 buses there. The Mexican authorities' operation appeared designed to drive the migrants back across the river into Texas. The European Union unveiled plans that would require smartphone makers to adopt a single charging method for mobile devices mandating USB-C cables. That's technology that many device makers have already adopted. But the main holdout is Apple, which said it was concerned the new rules would limit innovation. The push by the EU will be welcomed by anyone who's searched through a drawer for just the right charger. And it could also dramatically cut down on electronic waste thrown out every year. Portugal is closing in on its goal of having 85% of its population fully vaccinated. The country is already at 84%, and that is the highest percentage globally. As we celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, we're highlighting one Hollywood legend's fight for more representation. Stephanie Ramos has more.
Tessa Thompson, Zoe Saldana, Jennifer Lopez.
Would you like to join us?
Lin-Manuel Miranda. These are some of the biggest names in Hollywood, and they're Latino. But new studies still show there is a lack of accurate representation in Hollywood. According to a study conducted by the U.S. Government Accountability Office in 2019, only 5% of leads in film were Latino, while Afro-Latinos made up 6% of lead roles in a 13-year span. Behind the scenes, only 4.2% of directors across 1,300 films were Latino.
We've known Latinos are not in movies. We have seen the conversations grow regarding diversity, equity, inclusion. But if these aren't leading to jobs, if these aren't leading to more representation on camera, on screens, for us to see ourselves, then this is for nothing. It's just lip service.
That, to me, is embarrassing.
Legendary actor Edward James Olmos is trying to change that. Teaming up with the Latino Film Institute, the actor created the Youth Cinema Project, a community-based program aimed at nurturing young filmmakers, and where kids as young as 4th grade can learn how to produce, write, and direct their own movies.
It's the full school year, and they learn how to do all aspects of filmmaking and storytelling.
High schooler Kimberly Mendiola Leon has been involved since she was 11.
It helped me realize what I actually want to do in life. They give me new opportunities.
Just one way Hollywood is rewriting the storyline for Latinos.
A program such as Edward James Olmos's is going to create a pipeline, a talent pool for the industry to go into and say, okay, let me look there and find the type of representation that this project needs and requires.
Our thanks to Stephanie for that. And lastly, the search for a celebrity walrus. Yes, you heard that right, a celebrity walrus. Will Gans has more on that.
Step aside, Waldo. These days, the world wants to know, where's Wally? The celebrity walrus gaining fame for his recent tour of Europe, missing for the last 3 weeks. Until now. Last seen in Ireland at the end of August, Wandering Wally has finally been spotted more than 560 miles away in Iceland.
Just keep swimming, just keep swimming, just keep swimming, swimming.
Experts confirming that it is in fact Wally by the scars on the front of his now famous flippers. Wally began making headlines back in March when he turned up in the UK, far from his native Arctic circle, making stops along the way in Wales, Cornwall, France, Spain, and finally back to Ireland. The sight, incredibly rare. Only 2 other walrus appearances have been recorded in Ireland since 1999, and none have ever made it as far south as Spain.
As sea ice is disappearing due to climate change, they're losing habitat. So we can expect to see more and more of those Arctic species becoming vagrants and becoming displaced from their native habitats and having to explore new range.
Wally's fans snapping photos of the 1,700-pound Arctic walrus balancing a starfish on his nose. And less adorably, all 1,700 pounds trying to rest on boats and dinghies, sinking several of them.
We should definitely make sure to keep these animals safe when they seek refuge on our shores and do whatever we can to avoid harassing or stressing them.
But now that he's further north, Seal Rescue Ireland saying, "We are absolutely over the moon that he's not only still alive and well, but he is well on his way home to the Arctic."
Bye, buddy. Hope you find your dad.
Thanks, Mr. Narwhal.
We hope that Wally finds his way home. Our thanks to Will for that. And that is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
It's an extraordinary story.
A computer salesman was